Ambassador Zephyr Moonweave of the Crystalline Dominion pressed her translucent fingers against the observation deck's reinforced viewing portal, watching the peculiar spectacle unfolding in the cargo bay below. The diplomatic vessel Serenity's Edge had been en route to the neutral trading station of Harmony Point when they received the distress signal from the human vessel Starlight Dreams. What should have been a routine rescue operation had turned into something far more complicated. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The humans below were setting up what they called a circus, transforming the sterile cargo bay into a riot of colors, sounds, and impossible contraptions. Zephyr had witnessed many strange customs during her diplomatic career, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of humans deliberately launching themselves through the air, balancing on thin wires, and somehow managing to make it look effortless. "Your Excellency," came the melodious voice of her aide, Councillor Vex Silverstream, whose aquamarine form rippled with concern. "The human delegation is requesting an audience. They wish to express their gratitude for the rescue, and they're offering something they call a quote-quote private performance in exchange." Zephyr's crystalline features shifted slightly, a sign of deep contemplation among her people. As the youngest ambassador in Dominion history, she had been chosen for this mission precisely because of her supposed ability to understand alien cultures. The irony wasn't lost on her that the first truly alien behavior she'd encountered came from the species that looked most similar to her own. "Have you completed the cultural analysis?" she asked, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that indicated formal diplomatic inquiry. Vex's form shimmered with what could only be described as confusion. "The preliminary scans are perplexing, Your Excellency. The humans appear to be deliberately placing themselves in danger for what they describe as, quote, entertainment. Our xenobiologists are debating whether this constitutes a form of ritualistic behavior or a previously unknown psychological disorder." Through the viewing portal, Zephyr watched a human female with vibrant red hair spin gracefully through the air, caught at the last moment by a male with arms that seemed impossibly strong. The crowd of other humans below erupted in what their translation matrices identified as expressions of joy and excitement. The contradiction fascinated her. These beings celebrated danger as if it were beauty. "The lead human, the one they call Marcus Brightwater, has been particularly insistent about the performance," Vex continued. "He claims it would help us understand their culture better. Though I should mention that our security chief, Commander Titan Stormforge, has expressed significant reservations about allowing the entire crew to witness what he terms, quote, organized chaos." Zephyr turned away from the viewing portal, her diplomatic robes flowing like liquid starlight around her slender frame. The Crystalline Dominion had established first contact with humanity only 3 cycles ago, and the relationship remained delicate. These humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. Where most civilizations develop technology to overcome their physical limitations, humans seemed to celebrate those limitations, turning them into art forms. "Schedule the performance for tomorrow evening," she decided, "but ensure that medical teams are standing by. If the humans' reputation for surviving impossible situations is accurate, we may need to be prepared for unexpected outcomes." As Vex departed to make the arrangements, Zephyr returned to her observation post. Below, the humans continued their preparations with an energy that bordered on manic. They laughed at mistakes, cheered at successes, and seemed to find joy in the mere act of attempting the impossible. It was a level of optimism that the Dominion scholars had classified as either admirable or deeply concerning, depending on the individual analyst. The human leader Marcus moved through the organized chaos with practiced ease. He was tall by human standards, with dark hair that seemed to defy their planet's gravitational pull and eyes that sparkled with an intensity that made Zephyr's crystalline heart flutter in a way she didn't entirely understand. When he laughed, which he did frequently, the sound seemed to resonate through the ship's hull, carrying an infectious warmth that her people's emotional dampeners couldn't quite suppress. What truly fascinated Zephyr, however, was the way the humans worked together. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of the Dominion, or the hive mind efficiency of other species, the humans seemed to operate on a principle of controlled chaos. They argued, they laughed, they made mistakes, and somehow, through all of this apparent disorder, they created something beautiful. The red-haired performer, who introduced herself as Luna Starfield, was practicing something called silk dancing, wrapping herself in flowing fabric and spinning through the air with movements that defied several laws of physics. When she noticed Zephyr watching, she waved with such genuine enthusiasm that the ambassador found herself waving back before she realized what she was doing. "Your Excellency," came another voice, this one carrying the gravelly tones of Commander Stormforge. The security chief's obsidian form materialized beside her, his presence as solid and unyielding as the asteroid fields he had once patrolled. "I must express my concerns about tomorrow's event. The human's definition of safety protocols appears to be considerably more flexible than our own." Zephyr nodded, though her attention remained fixed on the activity below. "I understand your reservations, Commander, but consider this. We've been studying human behavior for 3 cycles, and we still don't understand what drives them. Perhaps witnessing their cultural expressions directly will provide insights that our analytical methods have missed." "That's exactly what concerns me," Stormforge replied. "The last time we tried to understand human behavior directly, we ended up with the infamous pizza incident that nearly caused a diplomatic crisis. These beings have a remarkable ability to turn routine situations into chaos scenarios." The pizza incident had become legendary throughout the Dominion's diplomatic corps. A simple cultural exchange meal had resulted in 3 food fights, 2 impromptu dance competitions, and 1 human diplomat attempting to teach their negotiation team something called the Macarena. The treaty negotiations had been delayed by 2 weeks while both sides recovered from what the humans cheerfully described as a great party. "This is different," Zephyr insisted, though she wasn't entirely certain she believed her own words. "This is their art, their cultural expression. Surely it will be more civilized." Stormforge's form seemed to grow denser, a sign of deep skepticism. "Your Excellency, I've reviewed the preliminary reports about human circus activities. They include something called clowning, which appears to involve deliberate humiliation for entertainment purposes, and, quote, juggling, which consists of throwing objects into the air and attempting to catch them before they cause property damage or injury." Before Zephyr could respond, an alarm chimed softly through the ship's communication system. The voice that followed belonged to Dr. Nova Healwell, the ship's chief medical officer, whose silver form always seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. "Ambassador Moonweave, we have a situation in the cargo bay. One of the humans has injured themselves during practice. They're requesting medical assistance, but they're also insisting it's no big deal and want to continue with their preparations." Zephyr and Stormforge exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of concern. The human attitude toward injury was another aspect of their psychology that baffled Dominion scientists. They seemed to view physical harm as a minor inconvenience, rather than a serious threat to their well-being. "I'll handle this personally," Zephyr decided, much to Stormforge's obvious displeasure. "Commander, please prepare a security detail, but keep them at a discreet distance. We don't want to appear hostile or overly concerned." The journey to the cargo bay took only minutes, but it felt like hours as Zephyr contemplated what she might find. The Dominion's medical training had covered basic human anatomy, but their approach to injury treatment was vastly different from what she was accustomed to. Where her people would enter a healing trance and allow their crystalline structure to slowly repair itself, humans seemed to prefer what they called walking it off. The cargo bay doors slid open to reveal a scene that would have been comical if it weren't so genuinely concerning. A human male, who appeared to be in his early 30s by their aging standards, was sitting on what looked like a medical examination table that the humans had somehow constructed from circus equipment. His left arm was wrapped in fabric that Dr. Healwell had provided, but he was gesturing animatedly with his right hand while explaining something to the gathered crowd. "So then I told him," the injured human was saying, his voice carrying across the bay, "you can't just swing from the trapeze without checking your grip." But did he listen? Of course not. And now look at me, sitting here like some kind of amateur when we've got a show to put on tomorrow. The gathered humans erupted in laughter, apparently finding their companion's misfortune amusing rather than alarming. This reaction sent ripples of confusion through Zephyr's diplomatic training. In Dominion culture, injury was met with solemn concern and immediate isolation until healing could be completed. The humans seemed to view it as an opportunity for social bonding. Marcus Brightwater noticed Zephyr's arrival and immediately approached, his expression shifting from amusement to what she interpreted as respectful concern. "Ambassador Moonweave, I want to apologize for the disruption. Tommy here had a small accident during practice, but he's going to be fine. Dr. Healwell has been incredibly helpful." A small accident? Zephyr repeated, her harmonic tones betraying her confusion. Your colleague appears to have suffered significant injury to his primary manipulation appendage. Oh, this. Tommy called out from his improvised medical station, holding up his wrapped arm. This is nothing. You should see what happened to me in Cincinnati last year. Broke 3 ribs and still finished the show. This is just a sprain. Maybe a small fracture. I'll be swinging again by tomorrow night. Guaranteed. The casual way he discussed what sounded like severe injuries sent another wave of fascination through Zephyr's analytical mind. The human's pain tolerance and recovery expectations were beyond anything in the Dominion's medical literature. More intriguing still was the way the other humans nodded in apparent agreement, as if this level of physical resilience was perfectly normal. Dr. Healwell approached, her silver form flickering with the rapid color changes that indicated professional concern mixed with scientific curiosity. Ambassador, I've completed my examination of the human subject. His injury is indeed relatively minor by their species standards, though it would be considered severe trauma for most of our crew. What's remarkable is his insistence on continuing with physically demanding activities. It's not just insistence, Marcus interjected, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. It's passion. Tommy here has been performing for 20 years. He's fallen, been dropped, miscalculated landings, and gotten back up every single time. That's what makes us human, Ambassador. We don't stop because something hurts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We learn from it, adapt, and keep going. The philosophy behind his words struck Zephyr as both admirable and terrifying. The Dominion's approach to adversity was methodical and cautious. They analyzed potential risks, developed comprehensive safety protocols, and proceeded only when success was virtually guaranteed. The humans seemed to embrace uncertainty as a fundamental aspect of their existence. Perhaps, Zephyr suggested carefully, tomorrow's performance could be modified to account for Tommy's injury? The suggestion was met with what could only be described as polite horror from the assembled humans. They exchanged glances that spoke of shared understanding, as if she had suggested something fundamentally wrong with the natural order of the universe. With respect, Ambassador, Luna Starfield said, her red hair catching the cargo bay's artificial lighting. The show must go on. That's not just circus tradition, that's human tradition. We've performed in thunderstorms, during power outages, with equipment failures, and yes, with injuries. Adapting to challenges is part of what makes it art. The phrase, "the show must go on," had appeared in several of the Dominion's cultural analysis reports, usually marked with annotations expressing bewilderment at its implications. The humans seemed to possess an almost supernatural commitment to their chosen activities, regardless of practical obstacles or personal cost. I understand your dedication, Zephyr replied, though she wasn't entirely certain she did. But surely the safety of your performers is more important than a single presentation? Safety is important, Marcus agreed, his tone taking on a quality that Zephyr was beginning to recognize as distinctly human. It was patient but firm, explaining something that seemed obvious to him but might not be to others. But so is courage. So is art. So is the belief that we can overcome anything if we support each other and refuse to give up. As if to demonstrate his point, Tommy stood up from his improvised examination table, tested his injured arm carefully, and then performed a series of stretches that made Dr. Healwell's form flicker with alarm. See? Good as new. Well, mostly. Marcus, what time did you want to run through the opening sequence? Tommy, maybe you should rest, Marcus began, but Tommy was already moving toward a section of the cargo bay where other performers were practicing with what appeared to be flaming torches. Rest is for after the show, Tommy called back cheerfully. Besides, Luna's been working on that new silk routine, and I want to make sure our timing is perfect for the transition. Zephyr watched this exchange with growing fascination. The humans' commitment to their collective endeavor seemed to transcend individual concerns about safety or comfort. It was a level of group cohesion that rivaled some of the galaxy's most successful hive mind species. Yet it was achieved through individual choice rather than biological compulsion. Ambassador, Dr. Healwell said quietly, I should mention that during my examination, I discovered something remarkable about human physiology. Tommy's injury is healing at a rate that exceeds our theoretical models. His body is actively adapting to the damage, strengthening the affected area beyond its original capacity. Adaptation? Zephyr repeated, her diplomatic training struggling to categorize this information. Are you suggesting that humans become stronger through injury? In a manner of speaking, yes. Their musculoskeletal system responds to stress by increasing density and resilience. It's as if their bodies are designed to benefit from challenge rather than avoid it. This revelation added another layer to Zephyr's growing understanding of human psychology. Not only did they seek out dangerous situations for entertainment, but their biology actually rewarded them for doing so. It was an evolutionary strategy that defied everything the Dominion understood about species survival. Marcus, she said, turning to the human leader, I'm beginning to understand why your people's reputation for unpredictability precedes them throughout the galaxy. Your approach to risk assessment is unique. Marcus smiled, and again Zephyr felt that strange flutter in her crystalline chest. That's probably the nicest way anyone's ever called us crazy, Ambassador. But you're right. We do things differently. We have to. Our bodies are fragile compared to most species. Our lifespans are short, and we don't have natural weapons or armor. What we do have is the ability to dream, to imagine possibilities beyond our current limitations, and the stubbornness to keep trying until we make those dreams real. The stubbornness, Stormforge muttered from his position near the cargo bay entrance, is well documented. Hey, we heard that! Called out a human woman who was practicing what appeared to be a dance routine that involved spinning plates on the ends of long sticks. Stubbornness is just another word for determination. The casual way the humans interacted with authority figures was another aspect of their culture that fascinated Zephyr. In the Dominion, respect for hierarchy was absolute. Lower-ranking individuals would never dream of addressing a superior with such familiarity, much less make jokes at their expense. Yet Marcus seemed genuinely pleased by his performer's irreverent comment. That's Sarah Chen, Marcus explained, gesturing toward the plate-spinning performer. She's been with us for 5 years, and she's right about the determination part. Last year, she learned to juggle fire just because someone told her it was impossible for humans to safely manipulate flame. Safely? Stormforge's voice carried a note of alarm that made several nearby humans turn in their direction. Well, relatively safely, Marcus amended with a grin that suggested his definition of safety might differ significantly from the Dominion's. We use proper equipment, we train extensively, and we always have safety measures in place. But yes, Sarah now performs with actual fire, and it's one of our most popular acts. Zephyr found herself drawn towards Sarah's practice area, partly out of curiosity, and partly because she was beginning to understand that human culture could only be fully appreciated through direct observation. The woman was indeed manipulating flame, though she did it with such casual grace that it took a moment to register how extraordinary the feat actually was. The trick, Sarah was explaining to a younger human who was watching with rapt attention, is not to fear the fire but to respect it. Fire is a tool, just like anything else. It can hurt you if you're careless, but it can also be beautiful if you know how to work with it. Work with it? Zephyr asked, stepping closer despite Stormforge's obvious disapproval. How does one work with a destructive force? Sarah paused in her practice, carefully extinguishing her torches before turning to face the ambassador. Fire isn't destructive, Ambassador. It's transformative. It can destroy, yes, but it can also create. It can provide warmth, light, energy. The key is understanding its nature and working within its parameters. The philosophy implicit in Sarah's words resonated with something deep in Zephyr's consciousness. The Dominion's approach to dangerous forces was avoidance and containment. They built shields, barriers, and safeguards to protect themselves from anything that might cause harm. The humans seemed to prefer engagement and understanding, turning potential threats into tools for creation. Could you demonstrate? Zephyr asked, the words leaving her mouth before she had fully considered their implications. Sarah's expression lit up with the same enthusiasm Zephyr had observed in other humans when discussing their areas of expertise. Of course, but I'll need to set up some safety protocols first. Marcus, do we have the emergency extinguishers positioned? Already on it, Marcus replied, and Zephyr noticed that he had indeed arranged several pieces of equipment around the performance area. The human's casual attitude toward danger was apparently balanced by a sophisticated understanding of risk management. As Sarah prepared her demonstration, more humans gathered around, creating an impromptu audience. Their excitement was palpable, and Zephyr found herself caught up in the atmosphere of anticipation. Even Dr. Heelwell had moved closer, her scientific curiosity overriding her medical concerns. Fire dancing, Sarah began, igniting her torches with practiced ease, is about finding the balance between control and freedom. You have to be precise enough to avoid injury, but fluid enough to let the fire become part of your movement. What followed was 20 minutes of the most mesmerizing performance Zephyr had ever witnessed. Sarah moved through the cargo bay with liquid grace, the flames tracing patterns in the air that seemed to follow the rhythm of music only she could hear. The fire became an extension of her body, responding to her movements with perfect synchronization. But it was more than just technical skill that captivated Zephyr. It was the joy evident in every gesture, the fearless confidence with which Sarah approached something that could easily cause serious injury. When she spun the torches around her body, coming within inches of her skin, she wasn't showing off or taking unnecessary risks. She was expressing something fundamental about human nature, their refusal to be constrained by fear or limitation. "How do you do it?" Zephyr asked when the demonstration ended. "How do you overcome the fear of injury?" Sarah smiled, carefully extinguishing her torches. "You don't overcome fear, Ambassador. You learn to dance with it. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you focused. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, but to use it as a tool for better performance." "Dancing with fear," Zephyr repeated, the phrase resonating with unexpected depth. "That's a beautiful metaphor." "It's more than a metaphor," Marcus interjected, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been pride. "It's a philosophy. Humans have been dancing with fear for thousands of years. It's how we learn to use tools, to build cities, to travel between stars. Every advance in our civilization started with someone looking at something dangerous and saying, 'I wonder if I can make that work for me instead of against me.'" The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the ship's communication system. Vex's voice followed, carrying the formal tones of official business. "Ambassador Moonweave, please report to the bridge. We have received a priority communication from the Dominion Council." Zephyr felt her crystalline form grow slightly cooler, an involuntary response to stress. Priority communications from the Council were rare and usually indicated significant developments in interstellar relations. "I'll be there immediately," she replied, then turned to Marcus. "Please continue with your preparations. I look forward to tomorrow's performance." As she moved toward the cargo bay exit, Zephyr found herself looking back at the scene behind her. The humans had already returned to their practice, their energy undiminished by the interruption. Tommy was back on his feet, working through a routine that involved throwing and catching objects with his uninjured arm. Sarah was teaching the younger human basic fire safety techniques. Marcus was coordinating the overall preparation with the same enthusiasm he had shown from the beginning. "Your Excellency," Stormforge said as they walked toward the bridge, "I must express my continued concerns about tomorrow's event. The humans' casual relationship with danger is unprecedented in my experience." "That's exactly why we need to understand them better," Zephyr replied, her mind still processing everything she had observed. "Commander, these beings have accomplished things that our scientists considered impossible. They've survived in environments that would destroy most species, they've developed technologies that defy conventional physics, and they've maintained their cultural identity despite facing extinction-level challenges multiple times in their history." "All true," Stormforge acknowledged, "but that doesn't make them less dangerous. If anything, it makes them more so." Zephyr considered this as they entered the bridge. The command center of the Serenity's Edge was a marvel of Dominion engineering, with crystalline interfaces that responded to thought as well as touch. The priority communication was already queued, waiting for her authorization to proceed. "Before we listen to the Council's message," she said, "I want to ask you something, Commander. In all your years of security work, have you ever encountered a species that celebrated danger the way humans do?" Stormforge's obsidian form grew denser, a sign of deep contemplation. "No, Your Excellency. Most species develop defense mechanisms to avoid dangerous situations. Those that typically don't survive long enough to achieve interstellar capabilities." "Then how do you explain humanity's success? They've not only survived, but thrived. And they've done it by embracing the very challenges that would destroy other species. I don't have an explanation, Stormforge admitted. That's what concerns me. Zephyr activated the priority communication, and the bridge filled with the harmonic presence of Councillor Prime Astral Voidrite, the eldest member of the Dominion Council. The Councillor's ancient crystalline form shimmered with the accumulated wisdom of millennia, but also with something that might have been concern. Ambassador Moonweave, the Councillor began, their voice carrying the weight of official authority, we have received reports of your encounter with the human entertainment vessel. The Council has asked me to convey their interest in your observations. Of course, Councillor Prime, Zephyr replied, falling into the formal speech patterns required for Council communication. I am prepared to provide a complete briefing upon my return. That may not be necessary, Voidrite said, and Zephyr detected subtle harmonics in their voice that suggested the conversation was about to take an unexpected turn. The Council has been monitoring human activities throughout the galaxy with increasing interest. Their cultural expressions, their technological innovations, their approach to problem-solving. All of these factors have contributed to a growing recognition that humanity represents something unprecedented in galactic civilization. Unprecedented in what way, Councillor Prime? They are the first species we have encountered that seems to grow stronger through adversity rather than despite it. Their art, their technology, their social structures, all of these elements appear to be enhanced by challenge rather than diminished by it. Zephyr felt a chill run through her crystalline structure. If the Council was taking direct interest in human culture, it meant her mission had implications far beyond simple diplomatic courtesy. Are you suggesting that humanity's approach to risk and challenge represents a viable alternative to our own cultural development? I am suggesting, Voidrite replied carefully, that the Council is interested in understanding whether human methodologies might offer insights into problems that our traditional approaches have failed to solve. Your observations of their cultural practices may prove more valuable than initially anticipated. The implications of this statement were staggering. The Dominion's civilization was built on principles of stability, caution, and careful planning. The idea that they might learn from a species that seemed to operate on pure instinct and optimism challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligent development. Councillor Prime, Zephyr said slowly, are you asking me to conduct a formal cultural analysis of human entertainment practices? I am asking you to observe, to learn, and to report your findings with particular attention to how their approach to challenge and uncertainty might be applied to our own societal development. The communication ended, leaving Zephyr alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that tomorrow's circus performance might be more than mere entertainment. It might represent a window into an entirely different way of understanding existence itself. The morning of the performance brought unexpected complications that would have sent most diplomatic missions into crisis mode. Zephyr discovered this when Dr. Healwell's urgent communication woke her from her regenerative meditation cycle 3 hours before the scheduled event. Ambassador, we have multiple situations developing simultaneously. The medical officer's voice carried undertones of what could only be described as fascinated panic. The humans have been awake all night, and their preparation activities have resulted in what they call organized chaos, but what our sensors are registering as potential system failures throughout the cargo bay. Zephyr materialized her formal robes around her crystalline form and made her way to the observation deck, where she found a scene that defied every principle of logical preparation she had ever learned. The cargo bay had been transformed overnight into something that resembled an explosion in a rainbow factory. Colorful fabrics draped from improvised anchor points, strange mechanical devices hummed with barely contained energy, and the humans moved through it all with the casual confidence of beings who had long ago made peace with impending disaster. They've been up since what they call Dark 30, Commander Stormforge reported, his obsidian form radiating disapproval from every facet. Their energy consumption has increased by 300%. They've somehow jury-rigged our cargo bay's environmental systems to create what they call atmospheric effects. And Marcus Brightwater has requested permission to, quote, borrow some of our ship's gravitational dampeners for something called a high-wire act. Through the viewing portal, Zephyr could see Marcus himself suspended 20 feet above the deck, walking across a cable that appeared to be no thicker than a strand of crystalline fiber. He moved with fluid grace, occasionally pausing to perform what looked like deliberate balance challenges, as if the act of crossing empty space on a thin wire wasn't sufficiently dangerous by itself. How is he maintaining equilibrium at that height? She asked, her diplomatic training struggling to categorize the physics of what she was witnessing. According to their explanations, Dr. Healwell interjected, "Humans possess something called proprioception, an innate sense of spatial awareness that allows them to judge distance, balance, and movement without conscious calculation. They've apparently trained this ability to levels that exceed most species' technological enhancement capabilities." Luna's starfield appeared beneath Marcus, suspended in flowing silk fabric that she had somehow attached to the cargo bay's structural supports. Her movements created patterns in the air that seemed to complement Marcus's wire walking, as if they were performing an intricate dance, despite being separated by 20 feet of empty space and completely different performance mediums. "They're synchronizing without any visible communication method," Stormforge observed, his security-trained mind analyzing every aspect of the display. "No electromagnetic signals, no pheromone markers, no telepathic resonance. They appear to be coordinating through pure observation and anticipation." Zephyr found herself leaning closer to the viewing portal, mesmerized by the interplay between the two performers. There was something profound about their connection, a level of trust and understanding that transcended the need for words or technology. When Luna spun through a particularly complex sequence, Marcus adjusted his movement pattern to match her rhythm, creating a harmony that seemed almost supernatural. "Ambassador," came Vex's melodious interruption, "we've received another communication from the Dominion Council. Councillor Prime Voidright is requesting a real-time transmission of today's performance." The request sent ripples of surprise through Zephyr's consciousness. Real-time transmissions across interstellar distances required enormous energy expenditures and were typically reserved for events of galactic significance. The fact that the Council was willing to invest such resources in observing a human cultural display suggested that her mission had attracted attention at the highest levels of Dominion society. "Did the Councillor provide any explanation for this request?" Zephyr asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Only that the Council's Xenosociological Committee has identified human performance art as a potential key to understanding their species' remarkable adaptability and resilience." The implications were staggering. If the Dominion's most advanced thinkers believed that human circus performances contained insights into the species' evolutionary success, then what she was about to witness might represent far more than entertainment. It could be a window into an entirely different approach to existence itself. A soft alarm chimed through the ship's systems, indicating that the performance was scheduled to begin in 1 hour. Through the viewing portal, Zephyr watched the humans gather in what appeared to be a pre-show ritual. They formed a circle, joined hands, and spoke words that their translation matrix couldn't quite capture, but which seemed to carry deep emotional significance. "They're engaging in what appears to be a bonding ceremony," Dr. Healwell observed. "Elevated oxytocin levels, synchronized heart rates, and shared breathing patterns. It's as if they're creating a temporary group consciousness through purely biological means." Tommy, whose injured arm was now encased in what he cheerfully called a quote-quote performance brace, stood in the center of the circle. Despite his injury, he radiated the same confidence and enthusiasm as his uninjured companions. When he spoke, his words carried across the cargo bay with startling clarity. "Tonight, we don't just perform for ourselves or even for our amazing hosts," he said, gesturing toward the observation deck where he somehow seemed to know Zephyr was watching. "Tonight, we perform for the dream that brought us all together, the belief that anything is possible if we're willing to work together and never give up." The response from his fellow performers was immediate and visceral. They erupted in cheers, applause, and expressions of enthusiasm that sent measurable energy fluctuations through the ship's systems. Their emotional investment in their collective endeavor was unlike anything in Zephyr's experience. The Dominion's cultural events were marked by appreciation and respect, but nothing approaching this level of passionate commitment. "Ambassador," Stormforge said quietly, "I'm detecting unusual energy patterns from the human group. Their collective bioelectric field is fluctuating in ways that suggest heightened cognitive function and enhanced physical coordination. Whatever they're doing, it's having measurable effects on their performance capabilities." Before Zephyr could respond, Marcus appeared at the observation deck's communication panel, having somehow made his way from the cargo bay without triggering any of the ship's movement sensors. His sudden appearance startled even Stormforge, whose security systems were designed to track all movement throughout the vessel. Ambassador Moonweave, Marcus said, his smile carrying the same infectious warmth she had observed before. We'd like to invite you and your crew to join us for the performance. Not as observers, but as participants in the experience. The suggestion was so unexpected that Zephyr's crystalline form flickered with confusion. Participants? I'm not certain I understand. Quote, "The best way to understand Circus is to feel it, not just watch it," Marcus explained. "We've set up a special area where you and your staff can experience what we call ground-level performance. Activities that are safe but give you a sense of what drives us to do what we do." Safe activities? Stormforge interjected, his voice carrying several layers of skepticism. "Well, relatively safe," Marcus amended with a grin that somehow made his qualification more reassuring rather than less. "Basic juggling, simple balance exercises, maybe some collaborative problem-solving. Nothing that would put anyone at risk, but enough to help you understand why we find this so compelling." Zephyr found herself considering the proposal, despite every diplomatic protocol screaming warnings about direct participation in alien cultural activities. The Council's request for real-time transmission suggested that her observations were expected to go beyond passive analysis. Perhaps direct experience was necessary to provide the insights they were seeking. "What exactly would participation involve?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "Trust," Marcus replied simply. "The fundamental element of all circus performance is trust. Trust in your own abilities, trust in your equipment, trust in your partners, and trust in the belief that even if something goes wrong, you'll find a way to make it right." The concept of trust as a foundational element of cultural expression was intriguing from an anthropological perspective. Dominion society operated on principles of verification and redundancy, always assuming that individual failure was inevitable and must be compensated for through systematic safeguards. The human approach seemed to assume that individual success was not only possible but probable, requiring only adequate support and preparation. "Very well," Zephyr decided, feeling a strange flutter of anticipation in her crystalline core. "I accept your invitation, though I should warn you that my people's physiology may not be suited to your activities." "Everyone's physiology is different," Marcus replied with characteristic optimism. "That's what makes collaboration interesting. We'll adapt the activities to work with your capabilities, not against them." An hour later, Zephyr found herself standing in the transformed cargo bay, surrounded by her senior staff and 20 of the most energetic humans she had ever encountered. The space had been configured into multiple activity areas, each designed to showcase different aspects of circus performance, while accommodating the physical limitations of non-human participants. Sarah Chin stood at the first station, surrounded by what appeared to be dozens of colorful objects of various shapes and sizes. "Ambassador, this is juggling," she explained, picking up 3 soft, brightly colored spheres. "The basic principle is maintaining multiple objects in motion through careful timing and spatial awareness." Zephyr watched as Sarah demonstrated the technique, her hands moving in fluid patterns that kept the spheres dancing through the air in perfect arcs. "It looks like a form of 3-dimensional mathematics," she observed. "That's exactly what it is," Sarah exclaimed, her enthusiasm brightening the space around her. "Every throw is a calculation, every catch is a prediction, and every pattern is a problem solved in real time. The beauty is that your brain learns to do the math without conscious effort." When Sarah offered her the spheres, Zephyr hesitated only briefly before accepting them. The objects felt strange in her crystalline hands, warm with residual human contact and lighter than their size suggested. Her first attempt to replicate Sarah's movements resulted in all 3 spheres falling to the deck within seconds, but instead of embarrassment, she felt an unexpected urge to try again. "The first rule of juggling," Sarah said with a laugh that held no mockery, "is that everyone drops everything at first. The second rule is that you keep trying until you don't." At the adjacent station, Dr. Healwell was working with a human performer named Rico Goldstar, who was demonstrating something called balance work, using a large sphere that participants could stand on while holding support ropes. The medical officer's silver form was flickering with intense concentration as she attempted to maintain equilibrium on the unstable surface. "The fascinating aspect," Dr. Healwell reported, her voice tight with effort, "is that the instability forces constant micro-adjustments, creating a feedback loop between the nervous system and the musculoskeletal structure. It's like active meditation through controlled challenge. Even Commander Stormforge had been drawn into the activities, though his participation was limited to what the humans called strength demonstrations. He was working with Tommy, whose injured arm hadn't prevented him from teaching Stormforge techniques for lifting and supporting other performers. The sight of the Obsidian security chief carefully balancing a human female named Elena Moonspinner on his shoulders while she performed acrobatic poses was both surreal and oddly moving. The key, Tommy was explaining, is communication through pressure and movement. Elena and I don't need to talk, because we've learned to read each other's intentions through physical cues. It's like having a conversation with your body instead of your voice. But it was the central performance area that drew Zephyr's primary attention. Marcus and Luna had begun their main act, the wire walking and silk routine she had observed from the observation deck. But now she could experience the full scope of their artistry. The movement, the timing, the way they used space and gravity as creative elements, all of it created an atmosphere that transcended mere physical performance. "How do you overcome the fear?" Zephyr asked Luna during a brief pause in the routine. Luna, suspended upside down in her silk wrappings 20 feet above the deck, smiled with the same fearless confidence Zephyr had come to associate with all the human performers. "You don't overcome fear. You transform it into focus. Every time I'm up here, I'm afraid, but that fear makes me present, makes me aware of every muscle, every breath, every point of contact between my body and the silk." Fear as a tool rather than an obstacle, Zephyr mused, the concept resonating with her growing understanding of human psychology. "Exactly," Marcus called out from his wire, where he was performing a series of movements that seemed to defy the basic principles of gravitational mechanics. "Fear tells you what matters, what requires attention, what demands respect. Without fear, there's no courage. Without courage, there's no growth." The philosophy implicit in their approach challenged everything Zephyr had been taught about risk assessment and personal safety. The Dominion's culture emphasized the elimination of fear through preparation and technology. The humans seemed to embrace fear as a necessary component of meaningful experience. As the performance continued, Zephyr noticed that her own juggling attempts were gradually improving. The sphere stayed in the air for longer periods, her movements became more fluid, and she began to understand the rhythm that Sarah had demonstrated. More importantly, she found herself enjoying the process of learning, the satisfaction of incremental improvement, and the unexpected pleasure of physical challenge. "You're getting it!" Sarah exclaimed during one of Zephyr's more successful sequences. "See? Your brain is learning to trust your hands, and your hands are learning to trust your brain." The word trust again, but now Zephyr was beginning to understand its deeper implications. Trust wasn't just about believing in others. It was about believing in the possibility of success despite the risk of failure. It was about committing to action without guarantee of outcome, and finding meaning in the attempt itself rather than just the result. The performance reached its climax when all the human performers came together for what Marcus called the finale. It was a synchronized routine that combined elements of every discipline they had demonstrated, creating a complex weaving of movement, balance, strength, and artistry that seemed to transform the cargo bay into a different kind of space entirely. Zephyr and her staff found themselves naturally drawn into the performance, not as skilled participants, but as contributors to the collective energy that the humans had created. Even their limited abilities became part of the larger tapestry, adding harmonies to the visual symphony that filled the space around them. When the performance ended, the cargo bay erupted in the kind of celebration that Zephyr was beginning to recognize as distinctly human. There were cheers, embraces, and expressions of joy that seemed disproportionate to what had been accomplished, yet somehow entirely appropriate to what had been experienced. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, approaching Zephyr with the same warm smile he had shown throughout their interactions. Zephyr considered the question carefully, analyzing the complex cascade of sensations and emotions that the experience had generated. "Transformed," she said finally, surprised by the honesty of her own response. "That's the point," Marcus replied. "Every time we perform, we become a little bit different than we were before. That's what makes it art, instead of just exercise." As the humans began their post-performance cleanup, Zephyr realized that she had witnessed something far more significant than entertainment. She had experienced a demonstration of an entirely different approach to existence, one that embraced uncertainty as opportunity and transformed challenge into creative expression. The real-time transmission to the Dominion Council had captured everything, meaning that the highest levels of her civilization were now processing the same revelations that were reshaping her own understanding of what it meant to be alive in an uncertain universe. 3 days after the performance, Zephyr stood in her private quarters staring at a formal resignation letter she had been composing for the past 6 hours. The words on the crystalline display seemed inadequate to express the magnitude of what she was contemplating. Outside her viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but inside her mind, everything had changed. The door chimed with Vex's distinctive harmonic signature. "Ambassador, the Council's response has arrived. They're requesting immediate conference." Zephyr dissolved the resignation letter with a thought and activated her formal diplomatic interface. The holographic presence of Councillor Prime Voidright materialized in the center of her quarters, accompanied by 3 other council members, whose ancient forms radiated authority accumulated over millennia. "Ambassador Moonweave," Voidright began, their harmonic tones carrying subtle frequencies of surprise, "your transmission has generated considerable discussion within the council chambers. The Xenosociological Committee has spent the last 72 hours analyzing your footage, and their preliminary conclusions are unprecedented." "In what manner, Councillor Prime?" "The humans' approach to collaborative problem-solving appears to violate several fundamental assumptions about intelligent species development. Their willingness to accept individual risk for collective benefit, their use of emotional bonding to enhance physical performance, and their ability to create meaning through voluntary challenge all suggest evolutionary strategies that our models cannot adequately explain." Councillor Meridian Starbright, the youngest member present, leaned forward with barely contained excitement. "Ambassador, the committee believes that human cultural practices may offer solutions to the adaptation crisis." "The adaptation crisis." Zephyr felt her crystalline form grow cooler at the mention of the Dominion's most carefully guarded secret. For 3 centuries, their civilization had been stagnating, their technological advancement slowing, their population growth declining. The very caution and careful planning that had built their empire was now preventing them from evolving beyond it. "The humans call it growth through adversity," Voidright continued. "They deliberately seek challenges that push them beyond their current capabilities, and they use failure as information rather than punishment. Our preliminary analysis suggests that this approach could address the stagnation patterns we've been experiencing." "You're proposing that the Dominion adopt human methodologies?" Zephyr asked, hardly believing the implications. "We're proposing a pilot program," Councillor Astral Dreamweaver interjected. "A small group of volunteers would be trained in human approaches to challenge and uncertainty. You would lead this program, Ambassador, given your direct experience with their culture." Zephyr's mind raced through the possibilities. A formal program would mean extended contact with humanity, deeper study of their practices, and the opportunity to bridge 2 completely different approaches to existence. It would also mean leaving behind the security and predictability of traditional Dominion life. "There is one complication," she said carefully. "The humans have extended an invitation for continued cultural exchange. Marcus Brightwater has requested permission to visit Dominion space and demonstrate their practices to our people directly." The silence that followed was so complete that Zephyr could hear the subtle harmonics of the ship's crystalline systems. The idea of humans performing in Dominion space, with their chaos and unpredictability, was almost unthinkable. "Fascinating," Voidright finally said. "And your recommendation?" "I recommend acceptance," Zephyr replied, the words emerging before she had consciously made the decision. "But under controlled conditions, with careful monitoring and safety protocols." "Very well. Prepare detailed proposals for both the cultural exchange and the adaptation program. The Council will reconvene in 7 standard cycles to review your recommendations." As the Council's presence faded, Zephyr found herself alone with a decision that would reshape not just her own future, but potentially the future of her entire civilization. The resignation letter she had been composing suddenly seemed like the relic of a previous version of herself, someone who had believed that safety and certainty were the highest values life could offer. A soft knock at her door interrupted her contemplation. She opened it to find Marcus Brightwater standing in the corridor, his expression carrying the same warm confidence she had come to associate with his species. "Ambassador, I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to speak with you before we part ways." "Of course. Please, come in." Marcus entered her quarters, his human eyes taking in the crystalline architecture with obvious appreciation. "Beautiful design. It feels like being inside a living gem." "Thank you. What did you wish to discuss?" "Your people," Marcus said simply. "During the performance, I watched your crew's reactions. There's something happening in Dominion society, isn't there? Something that conventional approaches can't solve." Zephyr studied his face, noting the intelligence behind his casual demeanor. "What makes you think that?" "The way your council responded to our demonstration. The questions your staff asked. The fact that you're out here studying alien cultures instead of staying home where it's safe." Marcus smiled. "In my experience, people only seek radical solutions when conventional ones have stopped working." The perceptiveness of his observations struck her like a resonant frequency through her crystalline structure. "You're suggesting that our interest in human culture is born from desperation rather than curiosity?" "I'm suggesting," Marcus said gently, "that maybe we need each other more than either of our species realizes. You've got stability, wisdom, incredible technology. We've got adaptability, creativity, and what you might call productive chaos. Separately, we're both limited. Together, we might create something neither of us could achieve alone," Zephyr finished. "Exactly." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that Zephyr recognized as human recording technology. "I made this during the performance. Would you like to see?" The device projected a holographic replay of the previous evening's events, but from Marcus's perspective. Zephyr watched herself learning to juggle, saw her staff engaging with circus activities, observed the gradual transformation of cautious diplomats into enthusiastic participants. But more than that, she saw the moment when fear had transformed into excitement, when uncertainty had become possibility. "You changed that night," Marcus observed. "All of you did. That's what Circus does to people. It doesn't just entertain them, it reminds them of what they're capable of when they stop being afraid of falling. And if we do fall, then we get up, figure out what went wrong, and try again. That's the human way." Zephyr made her decision with the same spontaneous certainty that had characterized her entire interaction with the human circus troupe. "Marcus, how would you feel about bringing your performance to the Dominion capital? Not just as entertainment, but as teachers." Marcus's expression lit up with the infectious enthusiasm she had come to treasure. "Are you serious? You want us to teach circus arts to crystalline beings? I want you to teach us how to transform fear into focus, how to use uncertainty as a creative force, and how to find meaning in the attempt rather than just the outcome." "Ambassador," Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been reverence, "that might be the most beautiful invitation anyone has ever extended to our troupe." 6 months later, the Dominion capital of luminous harmony witnessed something unprecedented in its 1,000-year history. The Central Plaza, normally a serene space for contemplation and formal gatherings, had been transformed into a circus training ground, where crystalline beings learned to juggle, balance, and trust in possibilities they had never imagined. Zephyr stood at the edge of the plaza, watching Tommy demonstrate one-handed acrobatics to a group of young Dominion citizens whose crystalline forms sparkled with excitement. His injured arm had healed completely, though he insisted the experience had made him a better performer by teaching him to adapt and overcome limitations. Sarah Chen had established what she called the, quote, Fire Philosophy Academy, where Dominion scientists studied the practical applications of controlled risk-taking. Her students were learning that destruction and creation were often separated by nothing more than understanding and respect for the forces involved. Luna Starfield's silk dancing had inspired an entirely new art form among the Dominion's youth, who discovered that their crystalline bodies could refract light through fabric in ways that created living rainbows in the air. The beauty they created together exceeded anything either species could have achieved alone. But it was Marcus who had surprised everyone, including himself. His wire-walking demonstrations had evolved into something the Dominion called trust bridges, collaborative exercises where participants learned to support each other through uncertainty. The practice was spreading through Dominion society faster than any cultural innovation in recorded history. "Ambassador," came a familiar voice, and Zephyr turned to see Councillor Prime Voidright approaching with the careful dignity of ancient authority. "The preliminary reports from the adaptation program are remarkable. Our volunteers are showing increased creativity, enhanced problem-solving capabilities, and elevated satisfaction ratings across all measured parameters." "The humans call it growing through challenge," Zephyr replied. "They've taught us that safety and growth aren't opposing forces, but complementary aspects of meaningful existence." Indeed, the Council has approved the expansion of the program to all Dominion worlds. We're also establishing permanent cultural exchange positions. Would you be interested in serving as the first Director of Human Dominion Collaborative Development? Zephyr looked out across the plaza, where members of two completely different species were learning from each other, creating something new together, and discovering that the universe was far more wonderful when experienced with courage rather than caution. "Yes," she said simply, "I would be honored." That evening, as the twin suns of the Dominion capital set behind the crystal spires of the city, the plaza filled with music, laughter, and the sound of beings discovering what they were capable of when they stopped being afraid to fall. High above them, Marcus and Luna performed their wire and silk routine against the backdrop of alien stars, while below, hundreds of crystalline beings juggled, balanced, and danced with the fearless joy of species learning to trust in tomorrow's possibilities. In the years that followed, historians would mark this as the moment when two civilizations discovered that their differences weren't obstacles to overcome, but gifts to share. The humans taught the Dominion how to embrace uncertainty, while the crystalline beings showed humanity the beauty of patience and careful planning. Together, they created something neither species could have imagined alone. A culture that celebrated both stability and change, both wisdom and wonder, both safety and the courage to reach beyond the boundaries of what had always been possible. And in the central plaza of luminous harmony, where crystalline children learned to fly through silk and human performers discovered the music that light could make when refracted through living crystal, the circus continued every single day, because the show, as Tommy always said with his infectious grin, must always go on. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.